up in glory, Lord, we'll live eternally. The saints on every hand are shouting victory. Their songs are sweet as praises back from heaven's shore. And I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know you are. I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore. Oh Lord, you know you are. I have no friend like you. If heaven's not my home, then what will I do? The angels beckon me from heaven's open door, and I can't feel at home in this world anymore.
Once again, am I your brother Paul Offin, coming to you live on my own Facebook page and also on my YouTube page. Beloved, how are you doing? I hope you are doing fantastic. I am doing well with my family here. Let's give Jesus rebuked the Pharisees and condemned their actions for enforcing their own laws and traditions into God's law. Now, if you read Mark chapter 7, verse 7 and 9, and I quote what Jesus said. He says, "In vain do they worship me, teachings as doctrines and commands of men." 8 says, "You leave the commandment of God and hold to your tradition or tradition of man." 9 says, "And he said to them, you have a fine way of rejecting the commandment of God in order to establish your own." Now, if you want people to dress a certain way before they are adopted into the Christian religion, it means you are forcing something in the Christian religion. It is not there. It is not there. There's nowhere Jesus said you have to dress in a certain way. You see, God has no uniform policy or dress code for any man today. In fact, in the beginning, when God created Adam and, his wife, Adam, the man, or Adam, was naked until they sinned against God. When they first made something, they themselves made something to cover their nakedness. It is not God who designed what they used to cover their nakedness. They themselves, you understand? So if you read from Genesis chapter 3, verse 7, I reads, it says, "Then their eyes were opened." That is after they sinned. You understand? After they sinned against God, their eyes were open and they knew they were naked. And they sewed fig leaves together and made themselves loincloth. So they put something around their waist, and probably Eve will cover, the top part, because it's so important to women. I think you understand what I'm talking about. You understand? So this kind of dress that they first made to cover themselves was not designed by God, but they themselves chose to cover their nakedness by using this kind of tree leaves. Now, from there on, people make their own dresses to cover their nakedness, depending on their culture and also the geographical locations in which they found themselves. For example, those living under cold environment, you understand, dress differently from those living under hot environment. When God selected Israel as his people, probably this is where people are confused. He gave them several laws, including laws on what to wear. He designed what they should wear, especially the priest. He prescribed a dress code for the priest. You read Exodus chapter 28 and 39. And also commanded the people not to put on garments of clothes made of different kinds of what? Materials. Leviticus chapter 19 verse 19 and also Deuteronomy chapter 22 verse 11. Men were also commanded not to wear women's cloth and vice versa. Deuteronomy 22 verse 5. You see, people look at the dressing that, especially people from Israel, the way they dress, and they want to copy them. And they think that is part of religion, or that is part of the prescription God gave to man today. No. You see, today, some clergy men and individuals calling themselves as men of God dress to imitate ancient Israel, as if these dresses have any spiritual significance. They don't have any spiritual significance. You see, there is nothing wrong if one wants to dress like an ancient Israel, but it will be wrong to make it appear as if these dresses have religious significance or are bounded by what? Law. No. So you can put on your garment from bottom to down, all pure white, put on your cap, your red, cap or something like that. This have no significance in religion. You understand? The way the bishops and the pope and the rest, they dress, as if this kind of dressing has any significance in religion. No, God does not prescribe any religious dress for anybody. You understand? In Christianity, there's no attire prescribed for anyone. Rather, what we know is that Christian women are advised to dress modestly in order to accord themselves the respect deserved by the Christian women. So Paul says in 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 9, and I want us to read, and this is where I think we should focus our minds as Christians. Even though he was talking to the women, I think the men also have to dress modestly. Now, he says, likewise also the women should adorn themselves in respectable apparel, with modesty and not with braided hair and gold and pearls or costly attire. So this is the only instruction we have about our dressing in the Christian religion. You understand? Modest dressing is what Bible talk about. But it doesn't design anyone's dress for him or her. As Peter also added his voice to, women kind of dressing, Peter says in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 3 and 4, and I quote, he said, do not let your adorning, when you say adorning, it means the beauty or your attraction be external. And here Peter was advising women, the Christian women. He says, do not let your adorning, your beauty or your attraction be external. The braiding of hair and the putting on of gold jewelry or clothing you wear. Okay? But, verse 4 says, but let your adorning be in a hidden person of the heart, with imperishable beauty of a gentle and quiet spirit, which God's sight is very precious. So here, from these two scriptures, women are advised to focus more on their spiritual beauty rather than the physical features. So it doesn't mean women should not dress. No, that's not what these two quotations are saying. So the apostles are not in any way implying that women should not make themselves beautiful. But what they are advising is that instead of wasting much time to beautify yourself outwardly, you have to equally make time to beautify the inner being. That is, your spiritual beauty is what is more important than the physical, beauty. So it doesn't mean women should not be attractive. For me, women are always attractive. with or without makeups. You understand? So, because God made women so special, so beautiful, you understand? But sometimes they also put so many things on them, and in some situation, the beauty even perish, and they become like caricature when they dress too much. You understand? Makeup, changing their bodies, making all sort of things just to attract men. You understand? But the scripture is saying that they should make sure that their adorning should not be just what? Physical. You understand? It should be also trying to be beautiful inside you. That is what God wants. You know, the Christian religion is universal. It's universal. It's not for a particular group of people, so that if you are in this corner and you want to add your culture and your tradition, the way you dress, and then you call it a religion, that is not right. You see, it's a universal. Every race, every color, every person on this earth is allowed to practice Christianity. So we don't have any uniform. You understand? God's allow you to wear your own clothes and the way you wear it. But he advised that you should do this modestly. You shouldn't do things that people will talk about. That is what we're going to talk about now. So people in the world have different cultures and dress code. They dress differently to beautify God's creation and designs. In Christianity, God is silent about what one should wear. The only thing is he advised that your dressing should be modest. You understand? He doesn't design anyone's dressing for the person. You understand? So what you wear, the design and the material to use are not, designed by God, or God does not specify what kind of material to use to make clothes for yourself. But all that he does is just advise you to make sure that you're dressing. When you say modest dressing, we'll talk about it. What is modest dressing? It's acceptable to your own society. Even though the two scriptures mainly focus on the women, I think and I believe the same goes for the man. You should also dress modestly. What is modest dressing? You see, modest dressing may be defined as any dressing that is socially and culturally acceptable. Okay? Socially and culturally acceptable. Modest clothing are those garments that minimize skin or body exposure. So if you say your dress is modest dressing, it means you don't show your skin or your body, especially the part that are so sensitive, sexually sensitive. You don't show it. You cover them. You understand? That is why I'm saying that modest clothing are the garment that minimizes body or skin exposure. So any dress that attracts sexual attention must be avoided. It will be sinful to wear a dress in a way that attracts sexual attention. If you don't know, probably you say, well, I don't know. But because if your behavior is such that you invite people sexually to yourself, then you are causing a lot of stumbling block to people. And so it will be sinful. So you need to avoid such kind of dressing. You see, example is wearing more revealing body clothing. The clothes you wear reveals your body. Something like transparent dressing, mini skirt, and also clothes and other dresses that exposes your sexual sensitive part. You understand? Some people dress, especially some of the women, and expose parts of their breast outside. What are you doing with that? Because you want to attract men sexually. And some people wear miniskirts so tight to their body that exposes their shape. And some, they have transparent dressing. All these dressings are not good because they attract people sexually. And if you dress like that, then that is not modest dressing. You have to avoid dressing like this. So in saying that God does not prescribe any type of dressing or design of your dress or something like that, he also advises you to dress modestly. And we have said that modest dressing is any dressing that is acceptable socially, culturally, and traditionally. It is acceptable in your society. You understand? But if it exposes your body to the extent that all the sensitive sexual parts are exposed, that is not right. That is not right. Now, dressing that insult one's culture or traditional belief should also be avoided if possible. Even though such dressings may not be sinful in the sight of God, but for the sake of peace, respect, and tolerance for other people's culture and traditional beliefs, this should be avoided in countries and societies and then also environment where such dressings are not acceptable. So if you put certain dressing on you and you go to a certain society and they frown on that, it's not acceptable, please avoid that. Avoid that. Don't go there and cause any tension because of the way you dress. You understand? So this is the advice I can, give here. For example, certain hairstyle. Today you see the style of the hair people put on, especially the guys. You understand? Such as dreadlocks. Dreadlocks, if you go to certain countries, they are acceptable there. Even in the church houses, they are acceptable. But if you come to my country, if you are on a dreadlock, it's a problem. The same way, there's kind of probably my hairstyle. If you go to certain country, it's a problem there. So you need to know where you are so that you can accommodate to their, the style of dressing too, to be acceptable in that society. So it's important you don't do some kind of paintings of the bodies, tattooing, jewelries or piercings, anything that will be an insulting to the community where you find yourself. You have to avoid them. If you ask me, is this hairstyle wrong? I may not be able to say it, but you have to ask yourself, is it acceptable in the society where you live or where you are going? That is how you have to say. That is why I'm saying that there are certain dressing by itself. You don't have any biblical commands whether it is sinful or not. But you have to take into consideration where you find yourself if you will be accepted. Now, there are certain dressings and makeups that may not, as I said, be scripturally wrong or sinful. But remember what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 19 and 20. He says, and I quote, "Do you not know that your body is the temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? You are not of your own, for we were bought with a price." Okay? So glorify God in your body. So this body, God made it and God says in it. You understand? I don't know how God does it, but he said your body is the temple of God. So you need to make sure that you dress properly because God uses your body as his house. So you can't say that it's my own body, so I can do whatever I like. God said no. Paul said, you are not of your own, for you were bought with a price. And was speaking to Christians. You understand? So if you are a Christian, you can't dress anyhow. You have to know that your body belongs to God. It's a God temple. You see, and for this reason, every Christian has to, be mindful of the way he or she dresses the body or treats the body. Paul advises all Christians not to do anything that grieves a fellow man or stumbles anyone, even if they seems lawful or acceptable in their own community. Let's read the following passages and see if they may be helpful. Now, if you read 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 12, Paul says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. So the way you dress will be lawful in your society, but when you go to other society, it will not be helpful there. And you have to be mindful of these facts so that you don't go and make dreadlock to a society who frown on a dreadlock. You understand? You don't go as a man and wear skirt in a society where men don't wear skirt. You understand? Or if you are a woman, you don't go and wear trousers in a society where women do not wear trousers. This is what it's not sinful for a man to wear trousers if it is acceptable in the environment where you come from. But if you find it challenging somewhere that you find yourself, then you have to be very careful. And this is what Paul is saying, that all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. Also in Romans chapter 14, verse 15 to 16, Paul says, and I quote, for if any brother is grieved by what you eat, you no longer walk in a life. I will say, if any brother is grieved by what you wear, your hairstyle, the way you dress, then you are not longer walking in life, in love. Now, this is what Paul said. He was talking about food, but I am talking about the dressing. It goes with that. Sometimes, Paul is saying that the food, there's nothing wrong about the food. But if you are eating certain food because the society where you find yourself, they hate that food, Paul says you have to be very careful. By what you eat, do not destroy one for whom God or Christ died. Do you understand? So because I have liberty to eat this food, Paul says you have to be very careful. If that will destroy somebody, then don't eat it. So do not let what you regard as good be spoken of as evil. So the same way go to the dressing. As I said, food and certain food and dressing, they are all part of our culture. You understand? And our tradition. We have our traditional food, cultural foods. So, but what I eat here, probably I cannot eat in certain places. And that is what Paul is saying. You have liberty to do everything, but you have to be mindful of where you are. And do not, Romans chapter 14 verse 20, 21 said, do not for sake of food destroy the work of God. Everything is indeed clean, but it is wrong for anyone to make another stumble by what he eats. And I will say, if because of your dressing, somebody is stumbled. A woman, if because of your dressing, somebody is sexually tempted, then you have to be very careful. You have to avoid things that will tempt people sexually to be sinful. You understand? 21 says, Romans chapter 14, 21 says, it is good not to eat meat or drink wine or do anything that causes your brother to stumble. You understand? If your brother will stumble, Paul says, don't eat it. Not because it's sinful, but because of what? The conscience of other people too. You have to be very, very careful. Even though Paul was talking about food, as I said here, to some extent, um, to I would liken it to the way we dress. The food, to some extent, can be eaten, and but Paul says we have to eat it with caution if it's going to grieve someone. The same way, the way we dress, our hairstyle, the things we put on our body, if it's going to grieve someone, the same thing goes. You have to avoid them. The same applies to dressing makeups of the body. Now, 1 Corinthians chapter 8, verse 13 also says, therefore, if food makes my brother stumble, I will never eat meats, lest I make my brother stumble. You understand? Finally, brothers, I will say that let's, go to the advice Paul gave to the Christians at Rome. Paul says, if possible, so far as it depends on you, you live peaceably with all. Romans chapter 12, verse 18. If your dressing or your makeup will make someone unwelcome, or will make you yourself unwelcome in certain group of people, please, for the sake of peace, try to avoid such dressing. Cultures and traditions that are not pagan or religious in nature should be respected to avoid confusion. If the way they dress is not pagan, or they don't say this is religion you have to, then you can embrace it. You understand? And if your dressing and the way your makeup will cause confusion, then you have to avoid. For example, if certain group of people do not accept certain dressing or makeup, let's try to be tolerant with such people and avoid them when you are amongst these people. Finally, according to Paul, I'll give you an example what Paul did. Paul says circumcision has no religious significance. He thinks circumcision is a culture or a tradition of some group of people, which Paul was also, who is an Israelite, was part of that. You understand? But when Christianity came into force, circumcision has no significance in religion. So Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verse 19, that circumcision has no religious significance. But for the sake of peace and acceptance by the Jews, to pave the way for the gospel to be preached, he had to circumcise Timothy before entering Jewish synagogue. Read Acts chapter 16, verse 3. He has to circumcise Timothy before entering the Jewish synagogue. Other than that, they will not allow him to go there because, that is their culture, their tradition. And it's part of their religion, even though Christianity has come in and that circumcision is no more in force. They kind of something that was important to their religion. So if you are uncircumcised, you don't enter Jewish synagogue. You understand? For peace sake, Paul had to, circumcise Timothy. Not because it was sinful for Timothy to be uncircumcised. No, not at all. But because of peace and because he wanted the Jewish people to accept them so that he can preach the gospel to them, he has to do that. Now, my brothers and sisters, all that I have told you in this lesson is that we don't have any dress code from God. God allows us to dress as we want, depending on your culture, your tradition, and your geographical location. That is why God doesn't have, because God, the way He made the world, we have different kind of geographical locations with different weathers. So we cannot prescribe, warm clothes for everyone, so that when you are in hot country, you still wear warm clothes. Or you cannot prescribe any clothes that are for cold people or that are for warm people. Now, you understand my point. So God leaves your dressing to you, but all he advised against is you have to be modest in the way you dress. You have to dress in the way you'll be acceptable to your society, and also your dressing should not cause any one to stumble. Remember, all things are lawful, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful, but not all things build up. Let no one seek his own good, but the good of his neighbor. That is 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 23 to 24 I've just read. So always check your outfits and your makeups if they are culturally acceptable and helpful to other people. This is the end of my lesson on dressing. The guy who asks why my wife was wearing trousers is because in this country, trousers, we have female trousers and it is acceptable there. It's only where the guy is speaking from where women do not wear trousers. You understand? And that is why he was asking that question. But I think this lesson has probably helped you. So share it with other people too. And God bless you. Once again, I'm your brother Paul Offin. If you get time, please visit the Church of Christ and we'll help you with more teachings. God bless you.